Welcome back to Fuzz Lab. Today I'm going to be talking about tips and tricks for working with Vero board. Now I guess I should start at the beginning. I order all my parts from Tayda, T-A-Y-D-A, FutureLec, which true to their name, the parts arrive in the future, like 90 days in the future. And I know I shouldn't be going on record like slagging off a company, but just be aware, FutureLec's a fantastic selection, real good, pricing and everything, but every time I ordered from them, it was 90 days for the shipping. Now, that may have been because of me ordering weird parts like vibrator units, or it could be because I'm from Chicago. I got a couple of fuzz faces, and I got a wow over down by there. I'm going to show you. But, yeah, Tayda's really cheap shipping, and you get the stuff right away. Sometimes they don't have everything in stock, like if it's a good part, and it's like people just go apeshit and buy all of them. Like, come on, guys, save some of those cool aluminum knobs for me, I don't want all the little colorful 22-cent ones on all my builds. So anyway, really, you should be ordering your parts from Small Bear. Steve at Small Bear has been part of the community. They provide an unbeatable customer service and selection at affordable pricing. They have matched sets of germanium transistors. I mean, you could go through eBay, buy lots of them and sort through them and do the testing. This is extremely time consuming. And, there's all kinds of different ways you could do it. Or you could just order from Steve. He does all of that work for you. Hard to find parts like the CA3080, the compressor chip, the Vactrols, instead of electrical tape, a CDS cell, and a LED. He's got them. So I want to give a good plug for Small Bear Electronics. They're also USA. Go USA. We got Obamacare with the RFID chip and habits to support. So if you want to pay, if you're from another country like Bulgaria or Australia, you should feel guilty and feed the beast. So make sure whatever you do, you buy American, and that's going to keep us going with what we need to be doing over here. Long story short, I got my Vero board here from Tayda, and they call it strip board. Vero sounds kind of British, to pip chap. Oh, after tea time, we're going to break out a Vero board, aren't we? This is strip board. You can see it's tough to see, isn't it? But it's strips of copper that go that way, horizontal, isn't it? So what you're going to do, first of all, you're going to get yourself a Vero layout. What I do is I Google I Google Vero layout, let's say I'm going to build a PD2 high gain fuzz Vero layout. I'll type that into Google and then go to images, and there'll be a lot of scantily clad women. You don't want to click any of that. Let's stay focused. Next thing you're going to do, you're going to take a look at whatever Vero. You could actually make your own Vero layout. They have do-it-yourself layout creator. If you're not lazy or mentally challenged like me, you can do your own. Now, what you're going to end up with is a diagram, a Vero layout, and what I've got here, this specific one, you can see it's labeled 25 by 5, and then it tells you the amount of cuts, and then there's the jumpers are shown there too. So I'm going to start off showing you how I prepare. What I do is, I'll count them out, which usually takes me a few tries because of the double vision when the drinking. So you might want to have somebody help you with that. And then what I do, I use a real thick, this is like a carpet cutter knife blade in my knife. And I guess this is a gooder time than any. I need to do a public safety warning. The material that Vero board is constructed from is really, really bad for your respiratory system. Now seriously, I'm not joking around about this. If you like inhale any of the particles from this stuff after you've cut it, it just wreaks havoc on your respiratory system, causes some kind of herp AIDS or something inside your lungs, and you don't want to be like using a like hacksaw up on it, or like, oh, I got to change the baby made boom boom. Let me, while I'm cutting Vero. You want to do this outside. Seriously, don't be doing it in your work area. So you'll count it out, measure it out, maybe use a Sharpie, mark it out, and then what I do is I take a thick blade, go down it, at least 3 times, paying extra care to apply pressure towards the end, both ends, and I do it on both sides, and then I'll do the other axis, and then I'll lay it on a flat edge and break it off. Now what you'll find you end up with there, especially on the strips are running this way, on this cut here, you're going to have like, for every one of those strips, it's just like a little razor blade coming off because the copper's been cut very sharp. So what I do, you never want to use your hobby grinder and round this off, because that's going to create the debris. You go outside and you use a file, and so you'll smooth that end off. And then I have this tool that I put together here. It's a wire brush that's supposed to go like in a wheel, spin around, and I just put a dowel on it. And you never want to use this to clean your soldering iron or your tip. It will ruin your tip. Never, ever, ever, never do that. And once again, this stuff is so toxic, you take it outside, you'll find after you filed it, there's going to be the debris in there. It's tan color, you can't miss it. So then you clean this off outside. You never want to use your hobby grinder, because you'll find that there'll be all sorts of debris on the end of the wheel, and then you wouldn't want to have to clean that off. And then, of course, once you cleaned it, this debris would just be flying everywhere, and you'd end up with it like next to your bed, and you wouldn't want to have to use a vacuum and then inhale all that stuff. So we want to be real careful with our Vero board, kids. Now at this point we've got it trimmed down. It's like you're going to have to pretend there's no parts on here. It's 25 by 5. It's the right size. So then you see these on the diagram, on the Vero layout, there's going to be these little red squares. Those are cuts. Basically, it's strip board, because there's strips, so the electricity is going to flow all the way through the strip unless there's a cut. Now, what I like to do is I take masking tape, and I'll put a run of masking tape on the top and fold it over the bottom, and then on the other side, and then I'll label it. And it's kind of tight, so I go every other one. Like on this, it's 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, all the way up to 25, and then the other axis going down. So that's a good reference. It helps to kind of keep you from making mistakes, because making a mistake on a Vero, it sucks. This is what you want to do. There's only a couple things you can screw up: is putting them in the wrong spot, or having the polarity flip-flopped, which is why it's good to use sockets for your all your actives, your sockets. For your transistors, anything with 3 legs, it's like a transistor or a JFET, you want to socket those, kids. Anyway, you'll go through and very carefully, utilizing your numbers, what I do is I'll look at it and I'll use a poker tool, like a dentist pick tool, or a piece of a resistor, and I will stick it through on the appropriate number where that red box is, looking at the diagram, and then I'll flip it over, and I'll use a marker, and I'll lay them all out with a red marker, put all where the cuts are. And then when you're done marking them all, you take a smaller size drill bit. This is actually kind of big, but you'll lay it down, you place it in there, and you'll spin it by hand. And that will cut the copper out, cut a circular hole that will eventually remove the copper, so it creates a cut where the electrons are not going to flow. And then for cleaning that up, I use this. This is an excellent tool. I bought this tool set from Radio Shack. It's tough to see there. It's a wire brush on the end, and then there's a blade. I use the blade, the chisel blade, to run through the tracks to make sure there isn't anything touching, and And then this is also great for cleaning. That toolkit, you can find those online. Soldering toolkit comes with a few different tools, and there's one for bending the leads and the lugs. There's a couple pointy ones, a couple blade, one angle blade, one flat blade, and then there's this, which is a heat sink clip, which I find this is an excellent tool. Like when you got a resistor and you'll put the resistor in the board, what I do is I will put the clip in the middle of the resistor just to hold it on there. See, this is a lot longer than an alligator clip, so you can really get in there and grab parts that are in the middle of the Vero board, hold it in place, and then you flip it over. You have the long leads coming up, and what you want to do is you cut those first. You cut them to size first, because if you don't, you'll solder it, and then you'll go to cut it, and it'll wiggle it, and it can stress that joint, which will lead to failure. It could become a cold joint. This is like soldering to like military or like for the space shuttle. Like that's how they tell you to do it. And it isn't that much extra work to do it. I mean, you got to cut them either way. So this is how I choose to do it. And the next step, after we've drilled it out and done all our cuts, you can see that there's like little traces or jumpers that you have to add. Now, I know a lot of people like to use leftover strips, leftover leads from resistors, which is fine. I try to use the ones from the capacitors because they're a little thicker. And like, I don't know, on my compressor build, I used actual solid core wire. You know, I just got this thing about using real tiny stuff for the circuit flow for the audio. I don't like doing it. So after we've got it all drilled out, the next step that I do is I'll give it an alcohol bath and clean it up with the paper towel a couple of times. You want to get all that schmutz off there. There's, you know, with soldering, it's called wetting action, and what that is the solder melts at a certain temperature, and when it's fully melted, it will actually mix with the molecules in the copper. That's called the wetting action, and that's when you have a real proper solder joint where the solder is mixed with the copper, and that's what you want. So you find that the enemy in soldering is oxidation. You'll have this thin layer of invisible, like oxidation, which is like rust. You could just think of it as grime. It's got a layer of schmutz on there. It ain't good. And it's going to require more heat, which means to get a good shiny solder joint, you're going to have to sit there for 2 to 5 seconds. Well, I've kind of gotten a little better at doing this, and I can do it a lot faster with the method I'm showing you. So the next step in that is to take, you want to go to Walmart and buy your own box of scrubby pads. The green, I forget what this stuff is called, you know, like a Brillo pad type of thing. You don't want to go and use your wife's, and then this will end up going back in the sink, cleaning the baby bottle, and then you got the Vero, and then your kid starts growing a weird sex organ or something. So what you're going to do, you're going to lay down your Vero board after you've cut it, and copper side up, and then I fold this over, and you just start in on it. Wax on, wax off, you know, a little bit this way, a little bit that way, a little roundy action. And then you're going to see, probably no way you're going to be able to see on here that there's a layer of oxidation that's, yeah, you can't see it. It's a little different on the one side. So our oxidation has been kind of cut off. Now, one of the tools I utilize in Fuzz Lab, plumber's flux, don't go. It's like $1.19 at Harvey's plumber's flux at home. Don't do what Petey does. Go and get the real deal electronics flux, and you're going to want to remove that with rubbing alcohol every time you use it. What I use here, it's a red tube from a can of WD-40. You know, you stick it in for your schnapps can. And then I've got, I took apart an organ, and there were these, and for every key there was a little piece of, I think it was stainless, and then a spring section, and then another piece of steel. So I got one of those in there. So it's like this spring-loaded little guy that I use for applying. I try to use just a small amount of flux. Now, I tried a couple different methods with the flux, including plumber's flux. I built stuff 15 years ago using plumber's flux. And you know, they say, oh, never use it. You know, I've had guys like say rude things about me online before because I bragged about using it, but that's all. That stuff still works. Some of it I didn't even clean it off, but you really don't. If you're gonna use it, make sure you clean it off. I'll leave it at that. Anyway, back to the point here. I did try just taking the flux and bulk rubbing it onto the board. Just rub it all over the PCB, and it worked fantastic. I mean, the solder just, when you use flux, it's the opposite of not using it, where, you know, you're wearing shorts and it rolls off and, you know, gets you. But it'll just suck right into where it has to go if you have the flux on there. But what I found is if you just bulk rub it in there, where the cuts are, it'll arc. It'll bridge. Makes it much easier to bridge if you've just completely dolloped the whole. You know, now I'm painting a tree. You don't. So the method that I find that works for me at this point, what I'm using is I'll have the lead through hole, okay, and what I do is I take the application tool, which you could just use a needle. This is really cool though. If you drop it, you can always find it. So you take this, all right, and you just whoop, a little tiny bit will go on the lead, and at that point I take my iron and I touch it on the top of the lead, and instantly that flux will melt. It'll run down the lead and it'll hit the board and spread out into a little tiny puddle right where you want it. Then at that point I trim my leads and then I solder them. Now I've read that like military spec and like if you're soldering for the space shuttle, that's how they do it, you know. And the point is if you solder it and then you go in there and cut it off, it's gonna like jiggle it. And you could fail that joint. You could corrupt that joint. Could turn into a cold joint, which later on would fail, which isn't fun. And you can see, you know, a good joint is going to be nice and mirror shiny. And that's, you start using this flux and you clean your tip. Another little pointer I'm going to show you here. This you're going to think I'm crazy about this one, but it's worth every bit of extra wasted time that you're going to waste doing it. Especially I like these capacitors. They come on a strip of paper that's been glued. And it's usually all dry rotted, and you can't pull them out without a bunch of debris all over it. So what I'll do is every one of the parts that I install, well, specifically like the ones that have the leads on them, I actually take my scrubby pad and scrub each one of them. I'll try to remove a little bit of oxidation off the part as well. Now here's my like fine grit sandpaper. We don't want to be using that, kids. Don't even use wet sandpaper. That's going to take a little too much off. What it is this stuff, it actually, a lot of it has a surface on it. You don't want to remove that surface. So even with the buffing pad, you don't want to go freaking nuts with it. You know, it might even be smart for you to spray down a little schnapps before you do it. You know, I mean, after I scrub, I clean it in all the time with the alcohol. I refill these bottles, you know, like every other month, the whole bottle. I go through a lot of it, but part of that is, you know, a little cocktail action going down here in Fuzz Lab. So, this stuff here, this is made by 3M, and it's like foam with a sandpaper pipe surface on it. I always have a piece of this out in my soldering iron cleaning tray. I've got some like indoor-outdoor carpet that I cut that sits in there, and that's wet, and that's what I use to clean my iron. I'll clean it with that, and then if I want to give it like a good cleaning, this isn't really that wet, but I'll lightly give it a twirl on this, because this is kind of a good tip. And I find that, I mean, you could go and get one of those silver things, stick it in there and turn it, whatever works for you. I'm sure this, you know, like I said, I'm doing this all wrong, but that's one of the tools I like to use. I got this laying out here. It's a nice abrasive, and I use it for cleaning the parts too. It's kind of whatever I have laying out on the desk. Got my Carmex container with the flux in it. These things are nice. I got them from American Science and Surplus. There's some acid flux in here. It's good for large diameter stuff, big wires. I mean, I use a propane torch when I'm soldering big wires. So again, don't do what Petey does. And then I've got this here is I got a weight on this end. There's a little hobby vise here, and this is nice for holding PCBs off of the desk a little bit. I use this oftentimes as a PCB holder. Works really well. It's just a piece of wood that I cut with an awl, with a little glue in there, countersunk a couple screws in it. Old timey hobby vise, mini vise. Of course, you got your helping hands. Yay! Clap, clap, clap. You know. Got a couple of those here. This thing I use for holding wires. I don't know what this is. I got it at Salvation Army. It's a block of wood with a piece of braided wire that has a little mini alligator clip, but I use that too. When you're finished, I spray it down with the rubbing alcohol, maybe the thinner than the alcohol. I don't know. Lately, I've just been using the alcohol. It's this little mini wire brush that's just fantastic. And like when I use the drill to do the cuts, that's what I use to clean the debris out with. And after I'm done soldering and I've got flux all over it, I'll hose it down with the rubbing alcohol, and then I take that brush, and that's what I use to scrub it all out. I'll hose it down about 3 times, then I'll flip it over and blow real hard. Take your glasses off for that, because there's going to be all kinds of nasty stuff. Blowing real hard, you probably isn't the best thing to do, getting all that stuff in your eyes. Maybe you want to use a little mini hair dryer. This is an excellent tool. I got it out of the dumpster at the resale store. This is a women's curling iron device that what it had was it had a thing on the end of here that had aluminum core with holes in it, and then there were bristle brushes that came out in a circle. Okay, I use this all the time in place of like a big ass hair dryer, for melting heat shrink, for drying up the solvents. Anytime you need to evaporate something, or like even for painting, you know, if I'm painting something and I need to dry the primer real fast or something, I use that. Heat it up with it before I paint it. So that's an excellent tool. So I believe that's about it for Vero tips. I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you for watching. May all your stuff come up right the first time. Please thumbs up, subscribe. Special thanks to Chromosphere. Have you seen him? Another good YouTuber. And
Fun happened, guys.